This test. Yes. All right. Can you guys see what I'm seeing now?
Yeah.
All right. So everyone, if you guys want to cast, by the way, and so if people can see what you're looking at, there's this little camera icon. If you click on that, you get to this page. You click on casting and you cast to a computer. And then you just go to the web page that it directs you to. I think you need to be on a Chrome browser for it to work because it's using Chromecast. And then it's like oculus.com/casting or something like that. And then you can kind of do a live feed of what you're seeing in VR. But all of you guys, in order to connect your headsets, should go to the settings, go to system, go to Quest link, right? If you guys wanted to use Bluetooth, like you guys can do that upstairs. Down here, I'm going to ask you guys to use the cables. So make sure this is checked off. But where it says AirLink, this allows you to connect to your headset without plugging it in through Bluetooth. So you guys can do that on your computers upstairs, right? I'm going to disable that because I've got my cable connected and I want to connect to this computer. So whatever computer you're connected to is going to appear right there. And I'm going to hit launch and I should be taken to this gray space. So you guys remember that gray space? So you need to be in this gray space in order for your Unreal Engine to preview in VR. Okay. I can click on this little desktop icon here and I can see my computer screen. Remember? Or I could turn that off, right? But in my computer screen, if I go into Epic Games, I can use my mouse at this point, go to my library, go to my first VR scene, double click on that. Once this opens up, I should be able to see that my VR preview is green, which means I can play it. If you just see a play button here, if you click on this ... I need to click on this VR preview. And once I launch VR preview, I should be able to go into my scene. I should be able to teleport, grab things, throw them around, et cetera, right? I'm now in my VR scene. And if I hit escape, I can get out of it. Has everybody connected their Oculus Quest to their workstations upstairs and got it to work? Yeah, it's much easier the second time. Yeah, no, you didn't.
I don't have a one space.
Oh, okay. So you can just come down here. Try to restart it. Oh, did you not do the reg key, the reg edit? Okay, yeah, try not to, I guess you switched computers because I was putting all that stuff there. Yeah, Masood, can you move the boxes and stuff? You could put them inside of the box. Once you, yeah. Sorry, that's my fault. Everybody connected? Who's not connected? How about that? What's the problem?
I just need to agree that. Yeah.
Okay, you just have to, I think through the Meta app, you can connect to Yale Secure. I don't know if you're having trouble with Yale Secure. If you connect to Yale Secure, the certificate, there is a thing you can enter for the, yeah, that might be easier to do. Just go directly into, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. Okay, so if you guys are unable to connect to the, or in order to connect to Yale Secure, you need to select the CA certificate. Remember, we're having that issue, right? If you're still having that issue, you want to select Use System Certificate, and the domain name needs to be yale.edu. Okay,
Yeah, with this control, right, on the left, like, Xbox thing. What, who else is not connected?
I think it's just Angie. Is everyone else able to connect their headsets?
I think it's this option. Oh, right, right. You press on it.
Oh, no, you can
How's everyone doing?
like you.
We're all on the same page? Everyone's able to connect?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes? Who's missing? I feel like there's people missing. Huh? Elise. Yeah, you're right. Huh?
She's still in this class.
Oh, do you think she'll see the transfer out or something?
I'm not sure. It's so hard in the class.
Did she say something?
No, no, not to me, not to me.
Oh.
No.
But to someone else?
I saw her in the class.
You saw her?
This and then
Oh, so she's shopping around still?
No idea.
Okay,
I have no idea.
okay, okay.
Let me solve the thing.
I got a new one again, so let's see everyone.
You're in all four?
Well, I'm taking two and I'm taking for two.
You're TAing for 2 classes? Oh my goodness.
So one after the other.
Do you see this?
With Dorian?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about projects. Hey, guys. Let's come back to the real world for a second. And let's talk about your projects. This is not a design class, right? Kind of is, you're designing something, but you're not designing architecture. This is not a modeling class. Your project proposes lots of modeling. I don't recommend it. You can do whatever you want. I can't force you to do anything. But it's going to take up a lot of time. So if it's worth it to you and you want to devote that time, it's totally up to you to do it. But the more information you can find that already exists, the better, right? The premise of the class is to use a non-extant or a non-existent piece of architecture of historical or cultural significance, right? And the more significant it is, the more likely you're going to find materials on it, including 3D models that some other architecture student made that you could just take and use, right? There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Absolutely. Okay, so feel free to mine the internet for models. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, make it a real project, right? My suggestion is to make it a real project. Why? Because we want to talk about these projects amongst a group of architects, right? And architects are going to know about architecture. They're not going to know about some esoteric film that you watch, or even if it's not esoteric, just might not be relevant to the types of conversations we happen to be having in this building, right? And so try to tailor your projects towards that as well. That doesn't mean it's not valid to explore these other areas or ideas or topics. It's just maybe for your first foray into this, it's sort of easier to hit a softball than try to hit a home run out of Fenway Park. Does that make sense? Right? Because I know you guys are all ambitious. I get it. I've seen several of you, met several of you in previous generations as well, and I love that. But let's take steps before we can like run a race, right? Does that make sense? So try to meet, by meet, I mean METE, your expectations and your ambitions with the context we're in, which is one of learning, exploration, and development. Okay. So there are already some projects that I can talk about. But again, do whatever the hell you want. I can't stop you. I won't stop you. But when you bite off more than you can, or when you take a big bite, it's a lot to chew. And so don't choke on it, because I'll call you out on that too, right? So it's great to take risks. It's great to fail. This is the best environment within which to do that. But we're going to call you out on it, right? It's just sort of the practice field that we're in. Okay. My example is very much a softball, right? It's the Nakagin capsule couch. It was recently destroyed. Tons of photographs, models galore, right? Lots of materials, right? What's more important than sort of developing these as assets is in how do I want to talk about this project? How do I want to convey ideas about this project using the medium of VR, right? And this is really the question that you should be asking yourself as you narrow down your selection, right? How is VR conducive to this project? What are the qualities of the spaces we can occupy in VR? that might lend itself to some of the maybe narrative or conceptual ideas that the project has. Right? So with a Nakagan capsule tower, what's really nice about it is I can tell the entire story within this tiny, tiny little space. Right? And it's actually easier for me to convey that than even trying to like think about renderings. If you try to render a small space, pain in the ass, right? You have this crazy fisheye sort of setting on your camera. It looks all distorted. It looks all weird. But in VR, what's great about it is I can put you in a closet and it's a real experience, right? I can't render that closet or render you in that closet, but I certainly can put you in the closet, in which case this is literally about the size of a closet, right? And so I can really control what the player experiences and sees, right? I think I said this in the first class. You really have to focus on the 6 sides of the cube, right? What's in front of me, what's behind me, what's to the left and right of me, what's above me, and what's below, right? That's it. Even if you're outside, there's an imaginary cube with a sky above and the ground below and stuff around you. And that's all you really need to focus on, right? So if you're talking about a city, you need to imply that city within that space, because that's all I'm going to get, right? So what are the layers we can start to think about? Foreground, midground, background, right? This is an exterior experience, but also in the interior, you have foreground and maybe midground. And the background might be what I see through my circular outside of it, right? So I can imply, or those are the canvases on which I can paint my world, my virtual world. Does that make sense? And so you guys have to start putting yourselves in a slightly different mindset than maybe you're used to in a design studio, right? In a design studio, we're thinking of an entire building, and that entire building sits in an entire city. And it's hard for us to separate that context with the experience, frankly, the very intimate experience that VR offers us in a very, very small space, right? Even if the space is big, the space we occupy is quite small, right? About 2 meters, no, maybe 5 meters around us, right? Another thing to consider is the stuff that's closest to me is going to be or require the highest level of detail, right? So as I'm even looking for assets or context, like say I'm in a city, I want to throw in a bunch of cars into that city, or park benches, or even buildings, right? The stuff that's far away, I could almost take a 2D image and create like a Potemkin village. And that'll probably be just fine because I'm never going to get there, right? I'm going to experience what's immediately in my surroundings, right? So as you gather and even develop assets, keep that in mind. The things I'm going to be interacting with that are closest might want to be of higher detail, and the stuff that's far away needs to be far less refined. Okay? The way we determine that is we block out our scenes. Okay? So the design part of it is that it's designing the experience that a person will have inside of your space. And so these are kind of like my first attempts at, right? You guys big film buffs in here? You guys like movies? Yeah. Everyone loves movies, right? Even if it's like Marvel movies, right? There's a merit, those are valid too, as forms of visual storytelling, unlike what Martin Scorsese said. The thing about movies is we gobble them up, we consume them, right? But they're painstakingly made to contain as much information and as much narrative within a roughly 2-hour window. right? So you have to do a lot with a very, very limited amount of time. And our attention spans are getting smaller by the day, right? And so what I'm going to ask you to do is make a very, very efficient 30-second cinematic. If this 30-second cinematic is just the cameras flying through for 30 seconds, you don't fail the class, but you failed the assignment, right? And by fail, I mean, you're not going to not pass, but you're not using your time effectively, right? The 30 seconds, like every second is super important, right? And within that 30 seconds, you can try to cram in too much. You certainly can cram in too little. Or what's the opposite? Cram, be very sparse, right? So what you're trying to do is find that right balance between the information that you're trying to convey and the amount of time in which you have it, right? So very important aspect of this type of visual storytelling, and not everybody does this, not everybody has to, is you want to create story, right? Are you familiar with the term mise en scène? Right? It's essentially composition, right? You guys know composition. You guys take Peter Eisenman's analytical class?
No.
That never happened. That's gone. That's gone. Sorry. Right. Have you guys taken any kind of drawing analysis? Or have you, like, as a precedent study, analyzed an image or even a film still or something like that? Yes? Right? Again, this is the canvas of the filmmaker, right? Has anyone watched Mad Max? Fury Road, right? Go look at George Miller's storyboards for that. He does storyboarding like nobody does storyboards. Like he knows every like nanosecond of that film visually, and it's all drawn, it's all composed, right? It looks like a comic book, but it's just incredible amount of planning to make a complete and comprehensive film, to tell the story that you want, to keep your audience captive, right? That movie is nuts. Like your heart is going to explode, right? Because it's just constant action. And to choreograph all of that, to understand that, requires a lot of planning, right? So if you do an hour's worth of planning, it's going to save you 10 hours of production, right? So I think it's very important, but you guys can do what you want. I know some of you are just going to go, oh, I'm just going to fly the camera in 30 seconds. I'm going to be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, thanks. Right? But you guys can like get a lot out of that 30 seconds if you plan accordingly, right? The other great thing about planning is, you know, if I want to spend 10 seconds of it just focused on a child holding a teddy bear in a box walking stairs, all I need to worry about is a child's hand holding a teddy bear in a box up the stairs. I don't have to model the entire world in order to zoom my camera into a scene, right? And so what the storyboard is really going to allow you to do is really focus your efforts in achieving a set of predetermined objectives, right? And I promise you, your scene's going to look different than what you storyboarded, but you've given yourself something to work off of. Okay. In addition to storyboarding, a super important part of the process, a step, is gathering references. Okay. Gathering reference images is slightly different than gathering precedent images, which you may have done in studio, right? Precedents is just like find examples of buildings, put it on a board somewhere so you can talk about that in relation to your project. But when we talk about reference images, we're getting into very specific qualities, right? And so one is, you know, I found a series of photographs from this person, Noritaka Minami, who went and tried to photograph as many of these capsules as, I don't even know, he or she. I can't, there's a Japanese, Kanoko. Yeah, is that a boy's name? Am I allowed to even say it?
Sexist.
That is,
No, I'm just joking.
it is. So maybe it's a non-binary. Nor, Noritaka. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He or she could be whatever they want to be, right? But beautiful photographs this person took, right? Of a very lived in capsules, right? And so what I really wanted these for is to just really get an understanding of what a space looks like after it's been occupied, right? We're used to our renderings where like it looks like no one's lived there, the space is completely empty, there's a random like book here and a random plant there, but like it's not, it doesn't really have that lived in feel, right? They're all kind of uncanny. Architecture photographs are very uncanny, right? No one lives in these spaces. They look like they're in a museum exhibition somewhere, right? And so what we want reference images for is to understand the operations of reality or life, right? So if I want to show something abandoned or decaying, right? In addition to even just finding images of the tower itself or the capsule itself decayed, I might look at, okay, how does concrete decay? And go and do a Google search. Oops.
Yeah, I think.
Right? So concrete decay, right? And I might start to look for real images of how concrete decays and try to emulate that in my scene, right? If you don't have reference images and I just try to imagine what concrete decay is going to look like, it's going to look bad. Let's face it. We all have perfect ideas in our minds, but once we actually bring them out, it's not a complete picture, right? And so reference images are really, really going to be helpful in order to do that, right? So material references, atmospheric references, some of you are already doing that on the boards, right? But just like, what does a decaying corner look like versus a decaying wall, right? What do water stains look like? Like you can get very specific with it depending on what you're after. And in my case, I might want one of these capsules to look very decayed. And so I'll start gathering these images that clue me in on what's there. And the best part about it is it takes the thought process out of it. Right now, I don't have to imagine what decaying concrete looks like because there are plenty of examples out there that I can just use and emulate. Okay. Right. So some of these are cluttered and full. Like I might like just find random detritus and start throwing it in there. And so a great place for me to look for random assets is Sketchfab. You guys familiar with Sketchfab?
Yep.
Fantastic website, right? I can just type junk and probably just find a bunch of stuff that I can toss in, just literally download and drop in, right? Oh, here's some concrete rubble. Maybe I want some of that. I'm going to download this model, download it as an FBX. I can preview it, right? Who does this? Who cares? It's free. Just take it, right? It's yours, right? It tells you how many triangles there are. Oh, this is a lot. How important is this to you? Right? Triangles are like money in CG land. Okay. When it's big, we call this an expensive asset. Right. This is probably done through photogrammetry. Anything over like 250,000 triangles is probably captured through photogrammetry. You guys know what photogrammetry is? Yeah. Okay. And so you have to be selective. You have to be a wise shopper, right? And so maybe I don't like that. Maybe I want something else. Let's look for books. Right? Anything with this little arrow is free to download. Some of these things you have to pay for. Don't pay for anything unless you really want it, right? There's a really kick-ass monster truck there that just has to be in your scene and it costs $5. $5 is well worth not having to model the monster truck, but you could probably find a free monster truck, right? In fact, let's take a look. Right? There's so many monster trucks, right? So many that aren't beautiful or perfect, but are free. Okay. So how am I searching for things? Well, okay, I might search for a chair. I might search for whatever that is, like an air filter or something like that, right? I now have something to go off of in order to populate my scene and make it convincing as a space that's occupied or used or cluttered, right? And I didn't have to think about that at all, right? I'm just getting it. And I could find hoarder. If I did a hoarder's room Google search, oh my, I'm afraid to do it, but I'll find so many reference images, right? So please use these images wherever you can avoid invention. It's probably for the best, right? In terms of your brain space, in terms of production. Any questions? Pretty straightforward. You guys already know this. This is like unneeded. You guys know what you're going to do. Right. I'm just going to go through my process. Right. This is my process. Right. Gather reference images. Right. So like here, I organize this based on the units, their relative height, tower A, tower B, just sort of diagramming the space. And I have no idea what I'm going to be doing with this yet. Right. I just have a vague set of storyboards and some sort of conceptualization. Ideally, you're conceptualizing your spaces in a more complex way beyond just recreating, right? Recreation is fine, especially when you're just using this as a design tool, right? Sometimes we just want to see what it's like. I just want to see what it's like, right? But if we're trying to tell a story, these are all opportunities by which you can convey concepts or ideas, right? So here I'm showing, okay, I want to incorporate the element of time, and I'm going to do that with the spiraling staircase that climbs up the tower, right? I looked at a few documentaries, right? Many of which you can just bootleg videos. Go on YouTube first. You'll find tons of stuff. But I found some documentaries about how Kurokawa spoke about these capsules. And something that he said was he anticipated these things to be renewed every 25 years. So it's only meant to last 25 years before you take it out, junk it, and you bring in a new, right? So I want to incorporate that, even if no one gets it, but there's still context or there's still a basis for that. So each level I'm thinking is plus or minus 25 years, right? So I'm trying to incorporate and integrate the architecture with this element of time, which was important to the concept of, right? I'm not inventing any of this. All I'm doing is I'm gathering information and I'm sort of interpreting it and then architecturalize or trying to architecture. Does that make sense? And so the idea is it's not explicit, it's more implicit within the design of your experience, what some of these conceptual ideas might be. And that's where the invention or the design comes in, not in the architecture itself. Okay. So what else do I need to do, right? Gather additional materials, right? Things that are totally unrelated, like Kowloon Walled City, I was like, okay, you know, maybe I have this idea of clutter and junk and just density, right? It's this idea maybe embedded in the metabolism as an architectural idea. I don't know. I'm just sort of, what's it, brainstorming, right? I have no idea if I'm gonna use it or use these references, but I just want to gather all of the thoughts that are coming into my mind as I'm thinking about this project. I want to gather information about the architecture itself. So as I recreate bits and pieces of it, I'm staying true to the original design. And then I'm just going to use all of that information and start molding a scene, right? Don't jump straight into detail, right? Start broad, but comprehensive, and then chip away at it. It's sort of like your Michelangelo, and you have a big giant piece of marble, and you want David to come out of it, right? That's a stupid example, but it kind of works, right? It's gonna take shape, and the details come last. And we might not even get to the details, and that's okay. But if your scene is robust and it has all of these elements in it, I promise you it's going to be more compelling than seeing a super detailed product that is just like, oh, okay, I see it. Take off the headset, what's it, right? You want to try to keep somebody in the scene. You want them to explore, you want them to touch, you want them to look, you want them to try to figure something out about the space that you're creating. Okay. Does that seem relevant to architecture? Right? Isn't that what we're doing as architects? Are we just designing, are we just putting walls up, or do we want to convey something beyond just the physicality of architecture through our projects? Right? That's pretty tough, but hopefully valid, a worthy exercise for you. Yes? Okay. This class is actually probably the hardest one out of all of them. Don't tell the other people. I think so. Right? But it definitely is. So sorry, guys. I should have said that in the video, right? I got you. Yeah, right? It literally is the hardest class because you're doing renderings, right? Or you're gonna do the things that are required to get a good rendering, right? You're doing animations, you're gonna place cameras, you're gonna edit, right? So you gotta put that that hat on as well, and you have to make a VR scene on top of that. What the fuck, Jason? Why are you doing this to us? Right? But I promise you, if you guys get into it, like this is a very valuable tool for studio. I have yet to see any student come out of this class that has actually, again, used Unreal Engine. That's not true. There have been a couple, right? But what I'm trying to maybe introduce to you is a workflow that needs to start early, that needs to start with a rough idea and get distilled into detail and nuance, right? And hopefully that becomes a valuable tool for your features beyond school, even, right? Masood, do you use Unreal? Oh, you all the time. There you go. Masood is a perfect example. I believe you. I believe you. I mean, he knows it really well. He was one of the star students. In fact, he won the Oculus Quest that was given away in this class, which we will do again this year. So the winner, right, of your own choosing, I have no say in this whatsoever, right? You guys will vote on which project is the best project at the end of the semester, and the winner will get an Oculus Quest 2 that I paid for. It has nothing to do with school. Okay. So don't tell anybody. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for it, right? So in fact, there's going to be two. First and second place will get an Oculus because they're cheaper than they used to be. Okay. So I don't want this to be a disincentive to not work if you don't think you're going to be voted, right? but this is just added benefit. If you want to enjoy the process, just do it. And I promise you, it's up for grabs. Like the scene doesn't have to be perfect. If you capture someone's attention, that's going to go a long way. Okay, so
So
don't.
the scene can be like invented by yourself, just using reference of like building that once existed. And for just imagine that it doesn't have to follow strictly after the reference.
Yeah,
that we put.
You want to be true to your project. Okay, if you diverge from the original project too much, it becomes unrecognizable for what it is. Then I think you're sort of venturing into a zone where we're not going to know how to engage with your project. Right? So you can approach it in a couple of ways. It's like, one, I want to teach somebody about this project. I want to show them something, the beauty in it that I see that maybe nobody else sees. And I'm going to use 30-second cinematic and a VR scene image to do that, right? But my recommendation, again, I can't control what you guys do, is stay true to the project, stay true to the original, right? So what might be helpful is if your project has like a bunch of beautiful drawings as like a visual style, you might start adopting the way the project was rendered, right? So if someone were doing Levius Woods, for instance, right, I might adopt the style of drawing, right? I might make things look like it was rendered with colored pencil and things like that, right? So again, the output of your work should be in keeping with the spirit of the project itself. Okay. And so, and it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but it's like you can do anything as long as you're true to the story that you're trying to tell, right? And ideally that story is true to the project so that it's really about bringing out qualities of that project rather than, you know, the invention that's coming from your own mind. Right? Did you guys all see the examples from last year on the video? Yes. I sent like a supplemental video. Like, did you guys get that too?
No.
But there may be a few examples on the end of the video. Did you guys see all of that stuff? You want to look at examples? Would that be helpful? This is by Gabe. And so Gabe selected Broadacre City by Frank Lloyd Wright and decided to kind of turn it into a toy. And I think, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright made toys. I don't know if that's the impetus to sort of create like this very cute environment. There's no sound. There actually, sound is a very important aspect of it, or important aspect of the projects in general. Let me see if I can get. This is Masood's project. Masood was very interested in using particles and points. So he used Blender. Blender for this. Did he run away? And for the seminar class, I think he used more of a particle system through Unreal. And he'll be doing a tutorial on particles for you guys as well. But this project was kind of an analysis or three-dimensionalizing some of Zaha Hadid's early paintings. So just sort of taking the landscape of two-dimensional painting, trying to and you're like in a black room watching. right? This is Colin's project. So he wanted to capture etching by variation. And you can see like he's really trying to capture the etching style using a post-processed material in a it's kind of taking us through labyrinth that some of which I imagine he has to invent materials. I mean, right. These are the cinematics that they created, and then you pop on the headset and you're sort of walking around inside of that space. This is a very different project, but equally amazing. Trams did this interactive game essentially where you take parts of Chinese joinery. And so you have to carry around the pieces and just kind of, it tells you where to put it. This is kind of like a found environment to show like the finished product. Basil did Las Terrenas Resort by wa.k. It's kind of has like a more of a very fun vibe based on the drawing over time. And the VR experience is more like a tour. So like you're on I think you're on a flamingo inner tube, like a floaty. And then you're just being taken through this resort. These are previous year projects that aren't in VR, so I'm probably not going to show them. But similar idea, taking a non-existent project and bringing it to life. There might be some additional examples I can show. Yeah, I did not copy them. Yeah, I didn't bring them up. I can show you more examples if you guys want to see them, but I mean, those are really good projects too. And so like pamper your own ambitions. But again, it's an additive process. So what might feel very rough and like weird to you can easily become very polished and very, very compelling and workable. So it's not about, at least in this initial stage, it's not about fidelity. It's about comprehensive, big picture. What's the experience? Design the experience, design the scenes, design what we're looking at or interacting with, right? Even if you have no idea how to do any of this stuff, but pamper your like check that for now. Be ambitious. Tell us about what you want to do, and I promise you, we can figure out how to do it. And it's always easier than. Okay. Any questions? All right, who wants to tell us about their project? Do I have to call on you? Okay, yes. Is it Tara? Yes. Let me find your order. Literally the last, oh, yes. Pruitt-Igoe. Did you watch the film, The Myth of Pruitt-Igoe? Okay.
So Pruitt-Igoe was very influential.
You have a minute, by the way.
It's a very influential example of modernist architecture, and it was supposed to be public housing for the impoverished communities that lived within the core of St. Louis. And it failed epically due to a number of factors, but mainly because of the socioeconomic conditions of the time and also location. And because of the skip stop elevators, which is what I really want to highlight my PR experience, they were seen as an actual gauntlet through the hallways and actually hotspots for different criminal activities. And because of the obscurities and the corners and the very narrow conditions, they were basically prime environments for crime. And so I wanted to imagine a person getting off a skip stop elevator and having this horror gauntlet of getting to his or her room and trying to dodge the different challenges of things that were there.
I mean, this is a very loaded project, right? If you guys are familiar, the destruction of, or the demolition of Pruitt-Igoe is often spoken about as the death of modernism, right? Like literally the symbolic death of modernism. And it's largely kind of thought about as the failure of modernist ideas in relation to public housing, which a lot of studies and discussions and films and urbanists are challenging that idea, right? Pruitt-Igoe used to be a very sought after and vibrant community when it was first built. And it didn't become this way necessarily because of the architecture. And so I would challenge you to straddle this line as opposed to being one-sided or the other. Because when you force someone to make their own decisions or their own conclusions by presenting them with both sides, I think it becomes just inherently much more compelling as an experience, right? But to set that up is quite difficult because you have to think about the theories behind why a project like this failed, right? On one level, it's been talked about purely as a failure of funding and maintenance that led to the evacuation of Pruitt-Igoe by a very specific demographic. The demographic changed, and that was also in line with socioeconomic conditions as well, or the accessibility of housing during that time, right? So it's very, very loaded, and so tread carefully. Okay, but I look forward to seeing this interpretation. All right, anyone else want to talk? Any comments about Pruitt-Igoe? Did anyone see the film?
Yeah, I think another important factor to create, I will also be like right now was because of the finding remote segregation that happened before, and then when there again, so
I mean, there's certainly an element of time in this, right? Because there was a moment where it was considered a successful development. And then obviously that changed to the point where it became like this symbolic destruction, right? And sort of like a triumph of like these urban renewal strategies that were ultimately terrible, right? And so, yeah, it's a very loaded loaded topic, but a fun one. Lots to latch on to. All right, who's next? We're not gonna do everyone. Just
Yeah, so I'm looking at the, buildings for the design, but when I didn't do my, but I was kind of like, poverty alleviation scheme. The building eventually, collapsed, but his long-term goal for the area was kind of to create multiples of this, um, structure to create like the village and the top right corner. But the reality of marketplace kind of wasn't really like poor rundown area, and I definitely believe as many people that he was like using the design as a way to just like make name for himself and not actually consider what actually was happening. And even the school, the one that was built before the collapse had come run down because there's like so many other factors to consider in a place that poor. You can't just put like quote unquote good architecture and assume that's going to change everything because they need many other things to actually improve quality change. So I think that's a model of the building, and I'm thinking of like creating after like apocalyptic, but not really like just dark atmosphere around it. I'm trying to like shade the realities of macro actually to the building. So maybe like adding like components and models to the structure to
adding what?
like components like
Components?
yeah to the structure to like what it should actually be like how it should be run down. So like people be treated this for architecture, but with the like clothes hanging and like just like trying to like picture the realities of macro on one of the building and having effects in like extra um, levels. So
So what is your take on?
what's my take on this building?
Yeah, like, are you critiquing it? Are you offering an alternative? I guess for me, it would be interesting to see this in relation to other kind of floating cities that have been thrown out there, like a lot in Tokyo.
Yeah, well,
And just to understand like the infrastructure, because you're critiquing the work.
yes, I'm
It's-
thinking of work mainly because like, because he did something else like Tanzania that worked, but like this really never worked in this context because of the like social economic people that live there, and there's many problems that are.
Yeah.
I'm kind of critiquing like the tendency of Nigerian architects to like study abroad and come back and do like these fantastic things in like core areas to like act like they're like saviors of spaces, but really it's never going to work out. It's going to be like to be done to get efforts.
Yeah. So I'm at the risk of doing exactly what I don't want you to do, which is to invent too much. Part of your process or project might be, how do I critique this work through this medium? Am I critiquing this particular element of the project? Or am I critiquing this as an intervention that fails because it fails to address very real conditions and real needs that this community has, right? So one way in which I might critique that is to show what an actual intervention should do, which might be an argument for it needs more infrastructure, it needs more services, and real kind of problem-solving architecturalized solutions for this kind of floating village. And what does that look like? Or do you kind of critique it by, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, by turning it into like a sort of like a real estate sales pitch or something like that, right? Where you're being somewhat sarcastic about the way, and I think maybe this isn't speaking to the way architecture is kind of consumed today as these beautiful renderings or images that are really used to kind of sell a product or to sell a firm or an office, right? And so I think you could be a little bit more nuanced in terms of like what your approach to that is going to be, right? When you say components, for example, I would be very specific as to like, what are these components? Like, is it components that are lacking in the model that are vital? Or are, you know, or are they components that just are included, but just failed to perform or do what they're supposed to, right? Or is it just a failure of the architecture to address just what it means to build on water, to live on water, right? So I think there's a lot of potential there, but try to clarify what your objectives are without veering too far from the project, right? That's going to be the hard part. Because in a way you're saying that there's too little there, right? And so you have a lot, or you don't have as much to maybe work with as you would. Want. Yeah, but thank you. Any comments? Anyone familiar with?
No,
I was just gonna ask, how hard and complicated is it to like build and render like photorealistic, like natural water, like rivers and stuff?
I mean, it depends on what the output is. If it's for like a 2D image, it's easy. In VR, water is a little tricky. So you can kind of be creative, like Basil's water, it's very cartoony, right? There's a happy medium there, probably. But the idea is you ramp it up until it starts breaking, right? And so you get it as close as you can. It also depends on how far away from the water, right? If I want it to be photoreal, I'll just put a photo of it. But if I'm far away, probably it's not going to move, right? At least not in a complex way. But it'll probably get the job done. So we can talk about that. But it's essentially a plane with a material.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about their projects?
But we just want to go with time
Yeah.
instead of everybody asking who wants to.
Well, I'm
go.
not going to do everybody.
No.
I don't want to just volunteer. No, I'll volunteer you.
Talk about mine.
Okay.
Yeah, as I started in the beginning, like, I was interested in trying to reconstruct history, which is which is intended to be forgotten. So, prior to the state of Israel, but like over 500 villages which were before the war and after the war, all ethnic cleansing had destroyed. And well, we still acknowledge and commemorate these the events which happened. We barely have every visualization, which makes it difficult to relate. I would say, also for other people who are not part of this the ethnicity or part of the region. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to use VR as a tool to give oral history and the canvas to make people understand what these villages were. Because if I say, okay, 500 villages were ethnic cleansed and destroyed, I think it doesn't provoke anything. But if I'm making sure to tell people, hey, this was somebody's home and people lived there, I think people would have more empathy and would talk differently. And especially with everything what's going on in Gaza at the moment, I think it's very important to try to shine that's like being very objective while shining a light on a very subjective perception of this objective reality. So I thought it would be great I would like for the long run after this project, I would recreate everything and would create like 3 to 4 minute videos as I did in this research but I thought maybe it would be nice to go from the cemetery, which is like the northern part, up towards the church, which is still standing.
Mhm.
And there's also like a historic, an ancient synagogue which you would pass through. So these are like the three things which still stands to this day. And by walking through these things, I can envision that, like, I don't have to show everything, but I think it's enough to show how the village would function.
Mhm.
And on the space of how it would, like, how the interplay would be, I thought, as normally Israeli Jewish villages would normally corner the whole village and let only one side open and then tell everybody go there. I would thought like you can only go one way, and by the moment you turn, it's gone. To imply, okay, once you go the street, there's no coming back.
You're talking about the VR experience.
Yeah.
What is it about this village in particular? Or what is the specificity of
Yeah.
this particular village? Or is there greater power in this just being one example among so many that kind of underwent this type of erasure?
I thought about it, and I think there were two things. First, it's a Christian village because they come self-esteem Christians, so a lot of people don't know about our existence. So I thought it would be nice to highlight because it's often like it's a colonial which at the moment gets anti-colonial struggle, but it's also often portrayed as this history of Jewish versus Muslims.
Mhm.
So just by showing this, it's kind of trying to break this. This is what one, I think, why I was first into Christian villages. And then secondly, I thought the theorem is so important because these the people were internally displaced, they were not pushed out of Israel.
Mhm.
So the people actually fight for their right to return to this day. So now there's people still in this way with the marriage thing, and people still visit there to give social events there. There's a youth movement who clean it every day and every year. So I thought it's not just a funny thing that I do in class, but afterwards would send to them and tell them that they can do with it whatever they want to.
Mhm.
As like maybe a means to make their return happening.
Mhm.
So, and this is only in two villages, Kafarvira and Irakim. But this village is better documented.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, based on what you're saying, like, it seems like it would make sense to have the church like this sort of visible Christian structure within the frame of the VR experience, or definitely heavily featured in the cinema sequence. The thing that I found potentially very interesting about what you just said was like these oral histories that you're trying to capture. So if you have any access to like the actual history, whether it's been recorded from the person recounting it or just written down, that could become a very powerful voiceover that relates the narrative, the story being conveyed to the spaces that you're designing or showing, right? To begin to layer on the significance of some of these like moments within this village, right? The challenge for you is really trying to, you have a very limited, like everyone has a very limited in terms of what a person's going to get while they're there, right? So the cinematic is really intended to contextualize what your experience is going to be, give us a lot of information about what we're about to experience. It's almost like a set of instructions. It could be thought of as a set of instructions for what we're about to go through. And then once we put on the headset, then we're not just, oh, what's going on? Like we actually know where we're at, where it's very obvious because we just saw it, right? And so I think your challenge is going to be figuring out, how do I distill like so much history into this experience? And it might be very well captured, like a well found and placed story, like connection.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's try one more. Yeah. You guys have any thoughts Are you paying attention? Good. Thank you. Thank you.
I was also working on a reconstruction project, but it's like slightly, from a different angle, where basically I was looking, for the past couple of years at like, remote, like, northern villages of Russia, and because they're usually constructed out of wood, there's a really giant issue of, decay and abandonment, and sort of like, uh, the government not taking care of these buildings, and then people just kind of ended up leaving. So there is like really sad and terrifying statistics of like the amount of like cultural heritage loss as these villages are falling into decay. So I wanted to pick one out of sort of the three that I proposed. I ended up doing the one with the windmills, which I think would be sort of like the central element of the narrative as something that interacts with nature and sort of like sustains the community. So yeah, there's like, they're decently documented. So I would be able to remodel them pretty easily, and there are also some that are already done. So just sort of like, illustrating life then, but also like elements that we were talking about, that a house is more than just a house. There's like certain like, folklore and craft elements that are associated with it. So I was thinking to like quite literally visualizing some of them and have them as like entities that like exist in the world, like along with the user experiencing it. And there are like some like down in the bottom corners, certain like celebrations and like rituals that this village does. So maybe just kind of like, taking some of them and like taking the viewer through this experience.
And what is this artwork?
These are some of the like super like basic, like northern region folklore, people. So it's a lot of like just personified nature,
Mm.
which is just kind of like getting into this like really uncanny territory that like it's nature that's personified, I guess, and just like the hybrids between buildings and their context and the people who live there. They were quite interesting to me. There's one reference project. If you go a little bit up, there's this like, in the mood, there's this running house. Yeah, that's like running on roots in the middle. That's
Like growing out of roots from a
yeah,
tree?
yeah.
Mhm. Okay. I mean, you could start to think about like the visual representation of what we're seeing through like a direct connection to the artwork of, is it artwork of the era, or
No,
this
no,
is
it's
contemporary? Okay. Or even just like folklore, right? Like the personification of certain natural qualities. I guess what I would try to define is like, what is your experience intended to be? Is it like a documentation of the life in these villages? I don't know, when were these, like late 19th century,
They're like 1600s.
1600s? So this windmill is from the 1600s?
Yeah.
Okay, so like really, really old history. And then, like, what did these windmills do? Are they just like grinding wheat? Or, yeah, okay. And so it could be like your scene or your environment is intended to sort of teach us about the way these villages function. And so you have infrastructural elements like the windmill. Maybe you connect that to like sort of functional communal spaces. Um, and then sort of show residents and farms and storage, just sort of like giving us an understanding of how these villages function. That can sort of lead to an idea of like, am I looking at this from above, or am I at ground level? So like, kind of like Gabe's project, am I looking at like a model of this thing? And I'm seeing, okay, here's like the village. It's almost like a Settlers of Catan game board kind of thing brought to life, but with like real moving people, objects and things, so that we start to understand how each piece of the village that's kind of spread out over the space works. And maybe your cinematic sort of takes us in more of a ground
Yeah.
approach to it. Or it's like, am I building my own village? I put my windmill here and it starts rotating, put farms, and I put these things and people just start walking back and forth between them. I don't know, maybe there's some sort of an interactive logic there. Okay. Is anyone dying to go, or should we just move on? I know there's like, are you guys anti-volunteering? I know this is also a thing that's come up. Right? Is that a thing? Is that a thing though? Tell me, because I don't want to. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Makes sense.
Angie, you want to share? Okay. But let's talk about this for a moment. Like, you're a more introverted class. Does that mean you don't want to speak? Or you don't want me to call on you to speak?
Take off the mental load of volunteering and just being asked.
Really?
Yeah,
Is there a mental load though? Like,
it's just decisions.
I'm introverted too. Let me tell you right now, right? And the reason why I kind of feel strongly about this is because, like in school, sure, I can accommodate whatever you guys want me to accommodate, right? But we have to speak up once in a while too. And again, like I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but it sadly, like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? It's, somewhere like there's like a saying in Japan, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, right? In the US, it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And so culturally, we're in this kind of place where like we have to kind of practice this. So I don't want to force anybody to do it, but as an introvert myself, I struggle with this all the time. But I also think there's value in getting a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Okay. So that's all I'll say. I'll just start calling on you guys, but keep that in mind because I think it's important. Not just for school, but for everything, for work, for everything, right? Unfortunately, we do live in a place, at least if you plan on staying in the United States, where the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I'll leave it at that. Angie, go ahead. Thanks for volunteering.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna talk about slow house first, but I think I was just really interested in it because it has such strong themes of like perspective and time,
Mhm.
specifically, and that it's sort of sequenced into a series of views. And then there was also an exhibition that the video did based off of that project. But I haven't really thought about yet how, like, what I want to do with that just yet, except like past, just sort of visualizing what that experience would be like. And then the other one that I had thought about, which I'm not really leaning towards anymore, is the Panopticon. And so we kind of talked about this in your fall semester class. But I feel like now we're in an age of also self-surveillance. So I was thinking about recreating the Panopticon where instead of there being a guard tower in the center that can overlook the surroundings, it's an empty tower in the middle that's mirror clad, so that everyone on the periphery is surveilling themselves. So it's kind of like internalizing this previously externalized power relation. And so I guess some of these images that I collected are like not reference images, they're just like vibe curating.
That's fine.
And so I'm really interested in like obfuscation, how light may interact with certain spaces, and the sense of memory that these all of this image sort of evoke, where like things are kind of washed out or blurry, or just don't really, yeah. Because I feel like the idea of memory is really compatible with working with a project that was not finished.
Mhm. Well, is there a direct connection between how Diller Scafidio conceptualized a slow house with this idea of memory?
Um,
Or like, what is it in the source? Because like there's so much representational material in this, right? Even the way this model is rendered, right? I almost feel like you could recreate this as a model of the house and not the house itself. The house itself is kind of uninteresting, actually. Like, you know, I don't really want to go in the slow house, but I love the slow house as an idea.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is about like these frames and its relationship to media, and like their early work is always kind of centered on this this idea of the gaze and the way the camera um, projects an image. So like if you're familiar with their project for the brasserie in New York, there's a camera that's set up at the entrance, and everyone at the bar kind of sees almost like a paparazzi kind of image of somebody coming into a space. And so there's like this weird disembodiment of what you're seeing on the screen, what that means to us, versus just sort of the mundane walking into a restaurant, right? And so there's this very um, spectacle quality to video and the framing of these scenes or these images. Also the importance of the image. So like, for instance, with this house, it's all about the framing of the ocean view, the framing of the rear view mirror. There's definitely this relationship between distance and time, and these slices start to kind of divide the house in this very symbolic way, but each frame also has like its own narrative as well. And so I wonder if you can start to maybe think of the house as a model, but within that model, things are happening. So maybe you can take out one of these frames and we could look into that and see inside of the house or see something happening within that that could take on some of these qualities. But I would want these qualities to be connected with what's in the house itself too, right? So we're not deviating from maybe some of the ideas that are already kind of richly embedded in that project. Right? Because like there's a scene where someone's got a gun and they're pointing it. And I think there's like a sex scene in one of these as well. Like there's just like, it's almost like, oh, I caught my husband or wife cheating. And now like there's like a story that's implied in all of these frames. And so like you can reinvent that narrative or create a different narrative. But it's sort of, it's beyond the house. It's about the idea of it's about its context, even within like the the status of having a second home overlooking an ocean, right? And so I think there's a lot embedded in that. That's ripe for the picking. Okay, thank you. I'll make the rest of you. Oh, you want to go? All right.
And then I was like thinking about like the summer and like summer getaway, and so looking into projects, I found myself very familiar, which is dealing with the Coney Island of the West. But I don't think it's giving Coney Island that it's more sophisticated than that. It's like all this more like Moorish architecture. And this is sponsored by the church of like it's not the Church of Mormons, but like
they kind of like want to create this recreational space to prove to people that they are not weird in this way. And so it was kind of like a way for them to establish themselves in society and the fact that they are also like a normal church and they also do business and it's not funky. And I was also looking to like pictures of people who goes there and then people really make their people and culture that go to this space for bathing and having fun. And I was thinking about like maybe as the VR experience, I could recreate something that kind of like an intake on like a summer vacation and they're great soft lake. I don't know how I'm gonna go about that yet, but I was thinking of like maybe that's the arrangement of multiple components because people have to take like a railroad to get there. And then I was thinking about like everything. It would be like a scene where there would be like someone taking going past the railroad and then going through the path and take this grand entrance and whatsoever and if they take the dip in a great salt lake and it floats because it's empty. But yeah.
Nice. I mean, I think the postcard aesthetic is maybe Wes Anderson enough. I wouldn't maybe take it further than that, just because it starts to, I don't know, if you find a stronger relationship between the kind of visual style that you're after and the project itself. But there's something really intriguing and very sort of timely, or it refers back to the time when you see like these colorized prints, right? Because they're like, there's no color photography, so they literally paint the the negatives and print them that way. And so there's something already visually about these postcards that connect you to the time in which they existed. For me, I guess the challenge will be in like, where do you put someone to convey the either cultural or social significance of this particular project? Do you know if this model is available? This is a 3D model, right? Do you know, can you get it? Where did you find it? You should ask from this person. Maybe it's downloadable. I mean, it'd be great to not have to model it. But if you want to focus on a particular space, like some of these other images that you did were implying, like, then you could limit the modeling to a very specific location, right? And if you need an exterior shot, I suppose you can make a more simplified version of this as well, right? But if you can get this model, I mean, it sort of does all of that work for you. But yeah, I mean, I suppose I'd be interested in how you maybe illustrate through your work how this is unique to Salt Lake City. You know, I find it particularly interesting, like there's a bunch of Asian dudes like in the dock here, like how old is this picture? What is it? What's right? And there's something quite refreshing about that in a weird way. Like, oh, they're welcome in this place. I don't know that they would have been welcome in Coney Island, you know? And so there's something about the cultural significance of some of these images, or maybe you can mine some of these to like illustrate how this particular recreation space differed from others. Because I imagine spaces like this or public pools and these kinds of right, you pay to get in. Like there was like a economic model that this followed. And so, you know, it could be a project that teaches us a little bit about what it meant to find weekend fun for like working class levels of society in this area. or in this era rather. And so, yeah, I think there's something there. Like, is it like, and what are the period paintings? These are kind of like,
Either Utah or different something like that.
mhm,
I want to see the space through the lens of the sneakers.
mhm.
It's what vibes the colors. Yes, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's a possibility. I love that you're kind of gathering this color palette as well. But I will say there is something about the postcard aesthetic that seems in keeping with the spirit of this type of entertainment. It kind of they feel very connected. So something to keep in mind. Okay. Okay, thank you for volunteering as well. All right, let's in the last hour, I want to talk about blocking out your scenes. I think we have a pretty good idea of reference images and the types of images that will be helpful. There's no right or wrong. It's just gathering information, right? I can show you some other examples of that. Go back to where, um, this is for my fall seminar, but sketches, drawing like little plans of the spaces that you want to create that recreate some of the qualities that you're after are super helpful. You'll try things out, they won't work, you'll do them again. Like it's really good to just kind of like create that cyclical workflow. Draw something, make something, go into it, and then just decide like this is something that works or not. I think the example that I used for, let me go to a different board. This is maybe not as appropriate. One of the examples I showed was the Ladue project, the show cemetery. And I don't know if I have that here. Sorry. That was the previous year. Right. So here's my example. I think I was on the video as well, the Ladue example, right? So this is like a reference board, getting like plans together, just kind of analyzing a little bit to minimize the modeling, but taking the source information and trying to turn those into like rendered views like through Unreal Engine, right? But sketching just to get a sense of like, oh, what kind of space, like what are the qualities of the space that I'm after? So sketching is actually like beyond storyboards, right? Storyboards and sketches kind of go hand in hand, but sketches are just like ideas. Storyboards are like you're actually doing a little bit more composition, let's say. And then even finding like film references are great because you have an artistic director, you have a cinematographer, you have a director that already built these images. And so I can just take images from the Third Man and just try to apply it to Ladue, right? Just to like get that mood, and then start developing from at least the basis of a visual reference, right? And then some of you are already looking at atmosphere, right? If you want a creepy vibe versus a happy vibe, like with this, it was a cemetery, so it seemed like it was nice to get a creepy vibe. So I looked up creepy forest and just gathered some images. And then I really liked this one in particular. And so I went into this project or this software called Treeit. You guys heard of SpeedTree? Treeit is a free version of SpeedTree. SpeedTree is actually, I don't know if the school has it, but you can make your own trees, right? You procedurally make your own trees. And so what I did was I started like, you know, moving these dials around to create different branches and different thicknesses of trunks and stuff like that. So I'm trying to use this reference image to create my own asset, 3D asset that I could use in my 3D, like my VRC, right? And so, I did it. I changed the parameters and made like 3 or 4 similar trees and then used that and imported it into my model. I don't know if I have a screenshot of it. Here, maybe on the website. Right, so here's our kind of views of the interior. I mean, it's not good, honestly. Like it's just putting together these elements, right? It's not finished, right? It's not polished, but you just want to keep adding from, again, the rough and getting more and more nuanced so that if I wanted to work on this another like 20 hours, it'll look that much better, but the bones of the experience are sort of set up for you, right? And that's really what we're trying to get at. I don't know if I have the trees in here. I kind of wanted to show you. But anyway, like this is like having references, having sketches is really going to limit the amount of work you need to do in generating the asset set, right? If I could find a tree like this on Sketchfab, I would totally do that, right? But I couldn't find a tree like that was already available, so I had to use this software to make it. And it's surprisingly not that difficult to make a tree. Although, if you get up close, it's fake. It doesn't look, right? So you gotta kind of utilize or use the assets based on their output. So maybe the tree will be blurry or something like that. So it masks some of the imperfections. But yeah, having reference images like this, like, oh, I want Jesus rays coming in from this little portal up above. And so then like just really trying to make sure I capture that in real life, right? And just testing those atmospheric qualities. And then again, finding original source reference materials, like these are Ledoux's built projects. And so really trying to use the built project to characterize this like Unreal project, right? Because that's all I have to work, right? I don't want to invent because I already have real Ledoux projects that I could work off of. So I might as well use him as a reference for this actual work. And then, show forest is a real place. So just kind of finding references of that to understand what this place might look like, right? So again, don't invent, try to just gather images and use the reference images to help develop your scenes. All right, let's go before we run out of time. Let's jump into Rhino. So if you go into the T drive, I created this little folder called, I thought this would take it to the top. It doesn't. It's underscore 1019 CVR, right? You can just take the Nakagan folder and I'm just going to open my blockout model, right? I think I copied it to the desktop or to my C drive, so I'm just going to open it from there. Don't open it from the network, just copy it into your onto your local machines. Shoot, oh, there it is. Right, so I'm going to open up, let's open up blockout 2, I guess. Does this have Rhino? This is the one. Right, so. So here is an example of a blockout scene, right? Very, very dumb. It's boxes, right? This is a random street corner, right? I may want to, you know, kind of add certain qualities to what a street is. So like the distance of this street is, centimeters, no. Let me switch units. By the way, Unreal is in centimeters. That's why this is in centimeters. Sorry, this is not in, this is not in the Nakagin file, but just keep that one open for now. I'm just showing you the dumbest example of a blockout scene, right? Boxes that represent buildings. Maybe I want to start in some street corner. This is a completely fictitious, non-reference project, right? But what this is doing is it's giving me a sense of like, what is it like to be in this environment? If my project wants to put me in a street corner, what do I need to, what do I need to fill that space? Right? And give me kind of a path towards creating that enclosure that I was referring to, the 6 sides of the cube, right? So you can see there's this big void here, right? On all those streets, right? So maybe I'll put like an HDRI map behind it, or just a plane behind it, and put like another city street scene, because maybe it's far enough away where I can get away with that, right? But I just want to get a sense of scale and space from this, and I can take this model and export it and bring it into Unreal and test it immediately. And that's what I want you guys to do, right? Whether it's good or not, it doesn't matter, right? This is your first take on it. Obviously, if I was working from reference, I might take an actual image of a map, or take a piece of Google Maps and import it into Rhino and extrude those buildings from there. It feels more realistic because it's based on the real world. But it could be as simple as, I'm just going to make a street X distance wide. I'm going to make a 5-foot sidewalk and just toss some buildings in. And I just want to see where we're at, right? And so I could take this. I'm going to go to, I'm going to export this. Just look for now. We're going to do a Datasmith export with the example in a second. But what I want to do is export this from Rhino. So again, highlighting, file, export selected. I'm going to scroll down and select Unreal Datasmith, right? And if you're using Datasmith, it doesn't even have to be in centimeters, but don't worry about that part. Just, it doesn't matter for the time being. We'll talk about scale for the other assets. I'm going to just, whatever, desktop, city corner is what I'll call it, right? And in Unreal, I'm going to create a new map. So in my content folder, we want to keep things as organized as possible. And this you guys can do because we'll import something in a little bit. I'm just going to create a folder called levels, right? Remember, Unreal has an infinite number of theaters, which are called levels. And so here I'm going to create a folder where all of my levels are stored. I'm going to click on the add button. I'm going to click on new level, and I'm just going to call it L underscore street corner, right? And I'm going to double click on that. It's going to ask me to save the level that I was in. And you're going to see we have this entirely new environment, right? No lights, no nothing, right? So when you create a level from scratch, we need to add environmental. We need to add the environment, basically, right? So I'm going to go into Windows, Environment Light Mixer. Is this the one I want? Right? And then this is sort of like, this is like God mode in Unreal Engine, right? In the beginning, let there be light. I can add, where's my light? Sky and atmosphere. Atmosphere, light, high fog. Huh. I want my directional light. How come this isn't showing up? Directional light. Here's my sky atmosphere. Let's put that. I mean, technically this should work already. So, let's get that. I think the here. The VR template, I think, doesn't work with sky atmosphere. And so what I'm going to do is just find the old sky sphere, right? So you may need to do this yourself. So if you want, go to settings, show engine content. And what that's going to do is it's going to expose this folder. And I'm just going to look for the old sky sphere, so BP sky sphere, and I'm going to drag it into my scene, right? So now we have just a very basic environment. I'm going to go to skylight, and I'm just going to uncheck real-time capture, right? So, you could start your scene like this from scratch. The other way of doing it is if you can't be bothered, just go back to that original level and just delete all of the other stuff and just import your model directly, right? But I'm going to sort of do it the more correct way, let's say, and import my scene into a blank level. Right. I want to do a datasmith import, but before I can do that, I have to enable the plugin. So go to edit, plugins, and just type datasmith and check datasmith importer. And it's going to ask you to restart. Let's go ahead and do that. Right. So now we're back, right? It opens a default level, which is our whatever was in our contents or the VR template, right? So one thing I could do, like I said, I could take all of these things and just delete them. I'm going to do both, right? I'm going to delete all of these things, right? I can select. Basically, I'm going to select everything. I'm going to unselect my skylight, my sky sphere, my player start, my nav mesh. Anything that says nav, I'm going to unselect. My light mass importance volume. And there's probably a directional light. So the directional light is my sun, so I want to keep that. Right, let me expand this, right? So if you want to go this route where you just use the existing template and you delete everything. I would delete everything except for the directional light, light mass importance volume, nav mesh bounds volume. I can delete this no teleport thing. The player start, recast nav mesh, my skylight, and my sky sphere. Everything else can go. Bye-bye. Right? So this is one option, right? So we're gonna do both. Now I'm gonna go and import that datasmith file. So now if I go into this little plus arrow here, I think I could do it from here too. Maybe not. So go into this box with a plus, go to datasmith, and I'm gonna do a file import. And I'm gonna go to the desktop where I saved this, find that datasmith file that I created, and I'm gonna open it. Right? And I'm just gonna have it go into the content folder. I don't need lights, camera, or animations. I'm gonna import that. And so here's my Rhino model brought into Unreal. Right? We can see there are some problems with it. Like I can't see my sidewalk here, right? The reason that is because Unreal only renders the positive normal. So I can only see it from one side and not the other. So I'm going to go back in Rhino and flip those elements so that I can see them, right? But for the time being, here's my model. It's enough to get a sense of the space. I'm going to drop in a cube because I'm going to use this as my ground. I'm going to move it down. And I'm just using this as something my VR character can stand on. We'll talk about collisions, but there are no collisions in this geometry that I just imported, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select that cube. And I only want to use its collision, so I don't want to render it. So I'm going to make it not visible. And I want this to be hidden in the game, right? Hidden just means it's not visible when I hit the play button, right? So now you can see my box disappeared, but if I hit the P key, it's going to show me my navigation or where I can navigate. It's going to raise this up a little bit, right? So anywhere in green, I'll be able to navigate in VR, right? So now if I hit, do I have a player start? I do have a player start. I'm going to find my player start. I'm going to move it to the center of my screen. And now if I hit play, I'm in that space, right? And now I could put the headset on and go, oh, this is way too big. Oh, this is way too small. This doesn't work because X, Y, and Z. Oh, I really like this. I'm gonna keep this. I'm gonna really start testing the scene out in VR every time, right? So block out what you think your scene is going to be, right? This is not an easy task because VR space is intimate, like that gray space we see when we turn on the Quest link, like it's just empty space, right? So we have to really sort of think about the 6 sides of that cube, and that's what this blockout scene is really going to start to do, right? So, okay, I like this or I don't, I can hit escape, go back to my Rhino file and start modifying my block, fix the sidewalks that aren't appearing, and then test it, right? So now getting a little bit more serious with the model that I want to use, right? I can do the same thing, right? All this is right. I took this plan that I found online, right? I put it on a Rhino plane. And I just sliced the plane and rotated it to create this very basic version, right? This is not the final version. This is just, I'm blocking out. I just want to get the bones of the scene in place, right? And then this plan, it's the same exact thing, except, I took either this, it wasn't even this complicated. It was, here, let's go. Right. I took this plan and did the same thing, put it in a Rhino plane and just started cutting it up and raising parts of it up and down, depending on their elevations, right? And I just have one element in Rhino, right? I can take this and copy it and just start building up that scene a little bit more, right? But for now, I just want to be able to see what this one capsule feels like. And so I can take this and do exactly the same thing. You guys have this open, right? Highlight everything, go to File, Export Selected, right? I'm going to go to Desktop. Again, select Unreal Datasmith and call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it neck again capsule. I'm putting it on the desktop, which is the worst place, guys, to put it. Put it someplace where you can keep your assets organized, right? In fact, I'm going to do a better job. I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to go to my local drive, create a new folder. I'm going to call it knock again assets. And then I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it Datasmith. And I'm going to put it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have.
Oh, you don't? Okay. If you don't see that file type, go to Unreal Datasmith Exporter. And you'll see this Unreal or Datasmith Exporter plugins. Going to take you to this page. You're going to find Rhino Exporter. We want this for 5.3. So I'm going to click on View Archived Versions. And the next archived version is 5.3, which is exactly what I want. And this supports Rhino 6 and 7. So not Rhino 8, if you guys are on Rhino 8. I'm going to download the exporter. Double click on that to install it. Close Rhino, you'll probably have to reopen it again, and then it should appear. Right. I'm going to rename the level that I just created, and you guys can do that too if you want. I'm going to call this L underscore knock again, because now that I've imported the city block somewhere else, I'm going to use this level for a different purpose. Right. I'll wait till you guys. Are you guys still downloading the plugin? Is everyone good? right? So select your model, export selected. And hopefully now you're seeing the UDataSmith option. Save it to a good place where you're storing all of your assets, right? And then hit save, and it's going to create that u.datasmith file. In Unreal, right? I'm going to use that level that I created earlier, and I renamed it to L_napkin. The L just designates that it's a level. It's just a naming convention. Oh, it's not letting me open it. You know what? Maybe it's not good to rename it. So let's just make another level. I'm just going to delete this. It's generally better not to rename things just because there are a lot of dependencies. So maybe that was a bad suggestion. I'm going to hit add, and I'm just going to create a new level and call it L_knock again. Right. And again, you guys can create as many levels as you want to test different versions of your scene. Just be sure you keep track of them. Because if you have 10 of something, it's going to be hard to know which one's which. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and open that level. And again, I'm going to save the old level. We're going to have a completely blank scene. And I'm just going to walk you through that process again. Right. Remember settings. I want to expose show engine content. Where is it? Oh, did I pass it? Why am I not seeing it?
Under content.
Ah, show engine content, yes. Right. So again, settings, show engine content. And that will expose this folder. And while I have this highlighted, I'm just going to type BP_SkySphere, and I'm going to just drag that in. I'm going to go to my lights. I want a sun. I just need a directional light. And now with my SkySphere selected, I should be able to designate my directional light actor to work with the sun. Right? So I'm going to click on this down arrow, and I'm going to select my directional light. And the directional light responds, the SkySphere responds to the directional light. So if the sky, if the sun is up pointing down, then the sky is going to look blue. If the sun is pointed more laterally, it's going to appear red, like it's sunset or sunrise. So select your BP SkySphere. Over here, you'll see directional light actor. Just click on that drop down arrow and select the directional light that's in your scene. Right. And I can click on this checkbox. Does this work? Not working. I don't know why. If I go to Control L, I can move my directional light. So let's set it really low. And then I have to go and in my SkySphere, and I need to refresh it, but I don't know why this is not letting me check. There you go. If I hit the little refresh check, it's going to adjust the sky to work with the orientation of my directional light. So you can see my directional light is low, pointing laterally. It makes the sky orange because it thinks like the sun is setting. So if I hit Control L again, I can move the altitude of my sun to be higher and hit refresh again, and now my sky is right. Not important for now. Nothing. You could just, as long as you're in the viewport has an orange frame, you could hit Control L and move your mouse around.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
Really?
We have, we have to get the direction.
You're hold, no, you have to hold down control. L. Keep control L held down. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just control L and then move your mouse around. It should work. Yeah, it's moving. It's just maybe start lower when you hit control L and then move the mouse up, and that might help. You'll get the hang of it. Not important. All right, so now I'm going to import my capsule tower, the beginnings of my capsule tower. I'm going to click on this plus icon again. Go to Datasmith and go to Datasmith file import. Right? Now I have to find the location. Remember, I put it in a better place, which is on my C drive, called NAC again, assets, Datasmith. Oh, I could look at how many there are. I'm just going to do the blockout, which is the one I think I just created. Yeah. Is that today? No. What's going on here? Oh, this is the one I created. I'm going to hit open, put it in my contents folder. I might even create a Datasmith folder within that, but it's okay. Again, I only need the geometry and the textures. The textures has my drawing on it, so I need the textures. I want to be able to see that. And so here it is. Right? You'll often see this lighting needs to be rebuilt. The VR template works with baked lighting, which is essentially like painting shadows on surfaces. Right? It's a cheat to make something look rendered without actively calculating the lighting, right? The mechanics of it aren't important, but it's always good to just build your lighting. And so go to build lighting only. It just makes it run a little faster. If you didn't build lighting, it's not the end of the world, but if you're going to use the VR template, it's good to build lighting periodically, especially right after you import a big asset.
When we talked about essay downloading, how many triangles are too many to use this as?
It depends. If it's something that's going to be close to you, a few 100,000 is not the end of the world. If you have like an entire scene you're trying to bring in and it's got like 3 million polygons, I would probably do it, but it'll still work. It just might start getting choppy. For any kind of object, if it's in the 5-digit range, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. In a year from now, it's not going to matter. So it's almost like I don't even want to warn you about these things because it's so irrelevant for in the future. But yeah, I think limiting it to 10,000 is, or the 5-digit zone is, it's good. It's a good rule of thumb, right? So here are my assets, right? I want to walk around in this capsule. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to grab a cube. I'm just going to drop this cube right in my scene. I'm going to, so here are my control widgets, right? This is the scale widget. I could also hit R and change it. So W is move, E is rotate, R is scale. You could also click on these as well, right? But the hotkeys are very quick. R to scale. I'm going to scale in the Z axis, right? You notice that it's snapping. If I uncheck this little blue icon, it won't snap anymore, right? So I can make this a very thin, and I can, essentially I'm scaling 1D as you would in Rhino to just sort of fill my little floor area. I'm just going to lower this down so I can see my plan, right? Move is also snapping, right? It's snapping. So I'm going to turn off my move snap, which is this one, I guess. And then I can move it more smoothly. I'm just gonna drop this right below my plan, right? I don't care about visibility right now, but I could make it invisible if I wanted to, right? What we also need is if we go into our volumes, because remember I created this level from scratch, I don't have those things that the other template had. I'm gonna go click on this little icon here for volume. And I'm gonna grab my nav mesh bounds volume and bring it in here. Nav mesh bounds volume, right? And it gives me this little box, right? P is a toggle to show me where I can navigate. So the P key, right? I can go on show and I could also find it here. This is just a visualization of where I can navigate and where I can, right? So I'm gonna go with my nav mesh bounds highlighted, right? I'm gonna shrink this down, get out of the way, right? So I have my nav mesh bounds volume highlighted, which means I can go into the detail panel and adjust its dimension. So this brush settings here, I can increase the size of my nav mesh bounds volume to incorporate more of essentially this cube that I created, right? So again, I can only access that if I have my nav mesh bounds volume highlighted, and I can go scroll down. Sorry, where is it? Brush settings, and I can just increase or decrease the size of this box in X, Y, and Z, right? I only really want to navigate inside my my capsule for now. So I'm just making it this size. But if I want to be able to navigate across more of this space, I would just make it bigger. Right now, the green is only responding to the cube that I added because that cube has a collision. We'll talk about collisions later, but the geometry that you're importing is only visual geometry, right? The game engine needs more information to know that it's something I can interact with. And so I need to set up things like colliders. We'll touch on that next week. But for now, just throw in a cube, you could stand on it, and it'll work fine. Okay. And again, if you want to make the cube invisible, I can highlight that cube, scroll down to rendering, the rendering category here. And I can make this invisible by unchecking this box. And also I need to check this actor hidden in game, which means when I hit the play button, it's also going to remain hidden. Okay. The last thing we need to add, right, because we created this level from scratch, is our player start. So if I hover over this little chess piece icon, it says basic, right? I want this player start. And I'm going to drag this right onto my cube. Oops. And I'm going to fly or select my object and hit F. And I actually, for VR scenes, you want this to drop so that the middle of the capsule is intersecting my geometry, right? In every other game, like a third-person game, you want the capsule to be above the floor. But in VR, it needs to intersect. Why? Who knows? I do know, but you don't need to know. That's not. Okay. So here's my scene. If I want to just not show all of my game elements, I can hit G and hide all of the game elements. It's referred to as game mode, right? And so this is essentially what I'll see when I hit play. And so if I hit play now, don't crash. Save before you hit play.
Oh,
I'm going to hit escape. Oh, thank God it didn't crash. I'm going to save all. And hit play again. It's not working. I probably got disconnected from my Quest link, so I'm gonna go back in and reconnect.
It's totally working.
Let's say.
Oh yeah, here I am. And I can teleport, at least inside of this capsule. Can you guys see what I'm seeing? Yeah. I need a ceiling, so I add a ceiling. But here I am. This is one-to-one. I'm in the drawing that I found. That feels about right. Okay. Can everybody get in? Yeah, did you try it in VR? Okay. All right, so very simple scene, right? Don't go crazy modeling, don't go crazy like adding too much detail, right? It's really just about make it fast, go into it, check it out, fix it, adjust it, go into it again, check it out. Just keep that workflow happening over and over again, right? And so say that I modeled more. Yeah, I'll give you guys a moment. Okay, everyone come back to reality for a moment. Right? Say that I continue to develop my blockout scene, right? I can create versions of Datasmith files, right? So, and import newer versions on top of the one I just imported, right? So the way I do that is I can right click on my Datasmith scene actor and go re-import with new file. And I can replace this Datasmith actor with a different version of one that I created, or go back to a previous version if I want. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go re-import with new file, and I'm going to go to a different set of assets that I created. Oh, why isn't this showing up? I guess it's not here. Well, there's supposed to be other Datasmith actors here that are more developed, but I could select those and then import it in. I don't know why this is showing, but. So if you made a change and you're not quite sure, you can export it with a different name, and then you can always go back to previous versions of it. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Let's see what.
Let's say there was a problem with the data set file and you fixed it in Unreal Engine, and you would afterwards up connect using up re-import.
Mhm.
Is Unreal smart enough like Adobe to realize, okay, this is what he fixed?
Yeah.
Fix it for you.
Yes.
Or you have to fix it?
Well, so if you move an asset in your Unreal file, it'll remember that you moved.
Okay.
If you apply a material to it, it'll remember that you applied a material to it, as long as the asset doesn't change in Rhino. Does that make sense? So it needs the same name.
Okay.
So as long as you don't replace that image in Rhino, it's fine. So the question is, like, what if I went and decided to delete this, right? I hit delete, and it's gone from my Unreal scene. If I re-import my Datasmith, right? I'm just going to go back to the first one that I created. Whoops. Right? If I re-import this, it's not going to bring that back. It knows that I deleted that, and so it's going to remember that, right? If I did want it back, the other thing is if I move this and I did it again and imported that Datasmith actor again, it's not going to move this back because it's going to remember that I moved it, right? If I did want those elements back, I could do the same exact thing, except in this dialog, I want to respawn deleted actives. And I can import it. And the thing that I deleted comes back at least. And if I want to return this back to where it was, I can delete it and do the same thing, and it'll place it back to its original position. Or I can go here with this asset selected and go back. Whoops. I guess I can't do that. That'll just go to 0, 0. Yeah, I think the best way to do it is just delete this and then re-import. And again, respawn deleted actors. And it'll bring it back to where it was in the original datasmith file. Did everybody get to go inside the blockout model? Right? Pretty cool, huh? No, it's just a blockout model, right? It's not supposed to be. And so that's where you build. It's like the DNA of your environments. You're just building on top of that, right? You could literally bring in objects and elements and put it on top of your walls, right? And no one's ever going to see these walls, and that's okay. You could do it that way, right? So it's not about what you do in here. I mean, it is important that you're developing your assets appropriately, but at the end of the day, this is what your audience is going to see. So it needs to work in this space, right? So one last thing, remember those rocks, those concrete blocks that I imported, right? What if I want that in my scene, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click the add button, right? This won't be a datasmith import. This would just be a typical asset import in Unreal. So I actually want to make sure that I create a folder here. I'm going to call this, I could call this Sketchfab stuff, right? Just something that's going to allow me to understand what's what. And I'm going to create another folder just to be extra organized. Call this concrete rubble, because I might have multiple assets of concrete rubble, and I might try out different versions of each. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this little plus add button, and I'm going to add or click on the import to, and this is going to be the file path that I designated, right? Because I'm highlighting that folder, it's going to show me that folder here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, go to my downloads. What was that called? Let's go back to Sketchfab. I guess I could do a monster truck. Let's just download a monster truck. FBX is good, but GLTF is fine too, and Unreal can import that. OBJs are fine as well. I'm going to download the monster truck. There's something wrong with this. Why isn't this working? Shit. Let's go to downloads. Monster truck. Oh, here it is. It's zipped. That's why. I'm going to unzip my concrete. We'll do the concrete. Extract all. Extract. Right. You typically get two folders, textures, which has the image files that make up the visual material of the asset, and then a source which will have the 3D asset itself. In this case, you can see it's also zipped, so I'm going to have to extract that as well. So I'm going to extract that. And this is what I want, FBX. Right? So now I'll go back into my Unreal. Again, I have a folder I created for concrete rubble. I'm going to highlight that, click on the plus, go to import, go to my downloads folder. Again, I'll probably want to move this to somewhere that's a little bit more organized, but right now it's in my downloads folder, so let's just do it. And then I'm gonna go to my FBX and I'm gonna bring that in. You could probably keep all of the, I would uncheck this. Uncheck generate missing collisions, and everything else is probably fine, and I'm gonna import all. And sometimes this could be messy, sometimes it's clean. It depends on who created the asset. So let's see what happens. So here's my concrete rubble asset. Oh, this is pretty clean. So I want some rubble over here. So I'm going to drag this onto my scene. Whoa, it's big. Whoa, it's huge. Right? So I want to rotate this 90 degrees. It's not even 90 degrees. And I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to hit F to focus. I'm going to W to move this around. I'm going to rotate again. I'm going to turn off rotation snap so I can kind of fine tune it, move it so it intersects, right? This is a static asset. So if I click on this, it's a static asset in my details. So what that means is it wants to build lighting as well. So whatever, let's just do it. Maybe I shouldn't have done it. We don't have enough time for this. Cancel. All right, let's just go into VR. There are my rocks, right? And I can then make a determination. Are those nice rocks in VR? They look fine in 2D, but in 3D, they might look like shit. So you'll want to test that as well, right? So everyone find a Sketchfab asset. If you don't know which one to select, download a monster truck and put it into your scene. Any questions? I know that was fast at the end, sorry. But at this point, you guys should you all know Rhino, so except for one of you. You should be able to make a blockout scene, although you know how to extrude, so I think you'll be able to do it. I want you guys to create blockout scenes, right? Very speculative, right? Use shapes, boxes, pyramids, cylinders, right? These are all kind of proxies for what you'll actually build, right? You could get as complicated as you want to, right? No more complicated than right? No more complicated than this, right? So you can see this is just, I just copied the box over and over again, right? Put a ceiling on it, copied the box over and over again, and I made, I think I chopped it up a little bit more to add some more of the details for like the millwork inside of the capsule, right? But the same exact thing, just split the plane with a line and just rotated it to make the model of the capsule, right? But just a simple blockout scene and go into it, test it out, find an asset in Sketchfab, bring it in as an FBX or as an OBJ, and then try it out in your scene, right? And walk around in VR a little bit and see what it feels like. See if it's working for you or not. If it's not working for you, just adjust the blockout scene, but you're just slowly starting to create an environment. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay, good. You're free to go. Yeah. Oh, I've been putting it on Moreau. Is that not good? So the first class recording is here. This one will also be here. Is that okay? Or do you want to email? Right, they'll all be here in the Zoom recording session. Yeah. Did you have a question? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but what was in town.
Oh, no worries. You might want to watch the first class.
I
Were you here? You were here.
No.
Yeah, so you might want to watch the recording. It's kind of like, there's like a big lull in the middle of it, so you can skip over that stuff, but that'll teach you how to connect your
I
Oculus.
just did that today.
Okay. Okay,
That's
good.
all right. But yeah, I'll check to make sure.
Okay. Okay, good. Well,
I'm not on the.
I do. Can I add you to the campus as well? Okay, just send me an email so I can get your net ID and we can add you. Yeah. Guys, by the way, if I heard some of you talking about whether to work down here or upstairs. If you sync a drive folder to the local drives of your workstation upstairs and down here, you can access the file from both places. So that's something that I would recommend doing. So if you use Google or Dropbox or something like that, if you sync that folder to your local workstation, you'll be able to access it and it'll update so that you'll have the latest in each application.
Possible to take a break in the middle of the class?
You can leave whenever you want.
No, like, maybe after 1 hour, I can figure it out.
You can leave whenever you want, but I don't want to take a break because 10-minute breaks take 20 minutes. So if you need to go to the bathroom or just like walk around, you're welcome to do it. That's the best I can offer you. Thank you.
I think it's what. Like one hour, sorry, it's like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Working on our own like PC is okay, or do you recommend working with the school's workstation?
The school's workstation has a really powerful graphics card, so I think you're better off using that. But if you have a good workstation, then it could work. I mean, it'll be fine.
Okay.
But yeah, aside from that, I recommend the school because it has like a really powerful. It's a very powerful machine. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
That's one of the problem that we said, for the first thing, we had like three, where we had to do three, like where we had to propose three.
Yeah.
So it was saying that I don't want to go with.
You don't have to respond. Yeah. Right? I feel like you have a very standard vision. That's good. So I don't want to discourage you. There is something you said about, in my project documents, for the Am I recreating a sort of fictitious rendered version of something that is real? Something to keep in mind is, you know, when it's, there's a lot of assumptions one might make about your interpretation of it versus something that's, say, that feels more documented. Yeah. No. And so, just to be aware of that. Sometimes when it is kind of as truthfully and as honorably as we're doing it, the depiction of real through these kind of game type assets, it starts to take on qualities that they're sort of like in that camp now, right? So I just want you to be aware of that as you develop it. And so I think what's more important, at least in my view, is how it's really the narrative, the story of itself.
Yeah.
And about the history of the place, than it is about the development of the asset of the right? And so I think as long as you focus on that aspect of it, which seems like that's what you're interested in, right? Then I think you don't have to. But also we're sort of experimenting some of those things. I just want you to be aware of the perception of real versus. You might, I don't want you to say something that. But with that said, I think you should, if you're interested in exploring this, recreating, I think you should.
It would be fine and with both approaches. It's so nice that they are real, like I think it's literally a real representation. I feel like it's like they are
They are good. The thing is though, just try it and see how it goes. I've put programs for stuff. As long as you're making lighting, it might be okay. You could also just kind of call the areas and the development very specific space. Like if it's photogrammetry of a very large space, you would not need all of it. You can edit that. But remove all at that point. Or you could, part of your process would be, okay, I'm going to bring in the photogrammetry asset. I'm going to start blocking it out, building this, using that as like almost like, and then take out the photogrammetry as texture. But the difficulty there is the process of texturing and adding materials. That's a itself. So, but again, I don't want to spend all the time modeling. So if the photogrammetry works and it's like conveying the information you want, I think that.
the last question. So Edward, because I sent you the web industry like the video.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like I worked with her first, and this is how I also came on this road. And even though she's like really if it's 3D recreator, it's always like this gaming aspect.
Yeah. I think that's pretty.
Is there an ability? What I normally do when I video editing, and I have so much of it sending me things from the phone, so it is not a risk button. I would start to use like for the whole project, kind of like vintage 2000 by year, like not these really ugly historical something, but rather like just like starting to smooth like with the RGB, like the green and the green and the red.
You're talking about like chromatic application. Yeah.
Is this possible as a whole or do I? Okay,
You
so
can- you
as
can
an
add-
after effect.
I mean, so it's a post process.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could definitely apply these post process
effect.
In fact, if you want to do anything photoreal, kind of,
Yeah.
right, because the photoreal is like really, I mean, camera.
Yeah.
Then that's the visualization.
There is.
There's one of them.
How's it going? Good. Okay, how are you? And you know, what I would recommend to kind of avoid that uncanny valley, like digital video game asset quality that that would be good to avoid is to use some of the kind of post-processed camera effects, like you could use depth of field to like blur the foreground, the immediate foreground and the background, so that it starts to kind of have like in a way you want to mask that game quality through blurring strategically. And so yeah, I think those are all kind of possibilities. Um, and they're fairly easy to do. Definitely for the cinematic sequence.
For me, like for example, Assassin's Creed, that's a good job of like it's